I'll take the hit on comments for this. I think Volodymyr Zelensky has been absolutely incredible in what he has managed to do since February of 2022. Uh, a novice politician, a novice leader coming from the entertainment industry who has to try to ensure his country survives against the world's second largest military. He does it. A man who has taken all types of hits in terms of, the propaganda campaigns, the misinformation campaigns, the disinformation campaigns, and now not only from Russia, but from the Trumpists. And so he's got that double whammy coming in 2025, along with the internal challenges Ukraine still faces. And I think he plays the best out of a really, really bad hand. On the battlefield, just before we get to the coalition of the working, Russia's gains have slowed in the East. Now, a lot of the media haven't caught up with this, but what was already a very gradual advance in the Middle East has actually slowed down even further. And that's despite the Russians supposedly having the massive advantage in terms of manpower. In terms of, as we mentioned, the defense production and the wider arenas of the war, including drones, including missiles. And this, of course, is if the Germans come in with the Taurus missiles, this is going to be huge. In terms of those dimensions of taking the war beyond the front line, I think Ukraine has done fairly well. And I think in terms of politically, despite the poison of Trump, I think Zelensky is managing to keep key relationships going, again, especially with the Europeans, but also with folks like the Australians, for example, and groups out of Asia. So you've got all of that. And then you get to me there, okay, but what are they going to do with it now at this vital point? I think the first thing that needs to be said, Philip, is that nothing can happen in terms of the planning, in terms of the security arrangements, where the Europeans are involved with Ukraine until we get a ceasefire. And we got to be honest with it, because you cannot put European forces into a wartime situation, even in the western part of Ukraine, because Russia still has the pretense that they can attack in the West with airstrikes. And if the Europeans are there, they put themselves in danger. So the planning has to be on the basis of two things. One is, what do you do before ceasefire at keeping Ukraine in the game in terms of air defenses, in terms of frontline equipment, including ammunition, including long-range missile capability, right? But then what the press hasn't got a hold of is, and you and I discussed it going back when this started being floating out a couple months ago, is if there's a ceasefire, those Europeans go in, not to go into the front line. That monitoring arrangement will be, including what will be a demilitarized zone. It won't be the Europeans that are there manning it directly. They are in Western Ukraine, and they're overseeing the defense production facilities, the energy infrastructure. So if the Russians decide to kick off again, they're there as a deterrent. Because it's harder for the Russians to break a ceasefire if they're going to be attacking the Europeans. Ukraine has always wanted the NATO Article 5 protection. They're never going to get that formally. You and I know why. But it's almost a de facto NATO Article 5 protection once the Europeans are in Ukraine. But again, it has to follow a ceasefire. So the reason why we don't see a big plan that can all be unveiled is you can't unveil the plan till the ceasefire is there.
Yeah. So a few quick fire questions as we come towards the end of our time. Looking at all of it, do you think Donald Trump's going to walk away from this?
He could. I mean, Donald Trump walked away from Gaza. And let me explain that one as a parallel. Remember, he came into office, going to solve it immediately, and he got handed the gift on Inauguration Day of the Phase 1 ceasefire. Because here's the one thing that Trump and Witkoff did do. They went in and they told Netanyahu, you need to accept the Phase 1, right? So they got that in there. But when it came to the tough road, which is how to convert Phase 1 into Phase 2 of the ceasefire, which was never going to happen, in large part because of the hard right in Israel, and because Hamas isn't going to leave Gaza, then the American administration just simply gives a blank check to the Israelis, just like that. All right, now here we go with what you're referring to is that in the past week, About a week ago, Trump tells his advisors, this has been leaked to the media, that he's tired of this, he's frustrated of all this, he wants to step back from it. But then at the meeting between the Europeans, Ukraine, and the Americans last week in Paris, Rubio comes out afterwards and says, we could just wash our hands of all this and we could just walk away. Well, here's the issue. Rubio said that just after he had presented the Europeans and Ukraine with the proposal that would supposedly solve all this. So Rubio was blowing smoke a little bit in the sense of take it or leave it. Take this proposal or we're going to walk away from it, right? Well, again, that Ukraine's not going to take this proposal and accept it. They're going to want to negotiate it. The Europeans are going to want to negotiate it. So what it really comes down to is, will the Trump officials leave it up to Europe and Ukraine in terms of what they want to do? And there I got to say, I don't think they do.
Yeah. Well, and then we've got the talk of Trump saying this week there's going to be the potential for a peace agreement sometime this week.
Once the Americans go out, first of all, Trump doesn't get his photo op, which is what he really wants. But probably more importantly, it's one thing for J.D. Vance to be talking in principle about the fact, why should we be involved in European security? It's another thing for the Americans in practice to completely take a walk on this, because the entire American national security setup since 1945 has been premised on institutional links, which first and foremost have been with European partners. So you are talking about, if they're serious about walking away from this, that they're going to go and affect the Pentagon, the CIA, and the broader Five Eyes intelligence relationship, the State Department, even the American Treasury, all having to have a fundamental shift in the way that they carry out policy and operations. And whereas a lot of our headlines are people like Trump and his transactional friends, there will be a lot of people at middle and senior levels of the American bureaucracy who will not want that, will not want to go that far. I guess I say this goes hand in hand, Philip. The day that Trump finally establishes authoritarianism over the US administration is the day that he takes a walk on European security.
Yeah, well, it's and you're looking at that and expanding it elsewhere. The one thing he's been consistent on so far is his pressure on China and the trade war that he started with China. Are we potentially in a 1940-41 moment when it comes to China, and them deciding that Taiwan could be their Pearl Harbor? And do you think, and briefly as we finish, we're closer to regional conflict, or even worse, global conflict?
I think we're in regional conflict, but I think we're in regional conflict which is non-military to start off with. So I need to explain this. Look at it from the perspective of China and look at it where you sit right now. Okay, Trump has slapped 145% tariffs on you. Okay, he's done it. We were there in Trump 1.0 to an extent, and the Chinese would talk to maneuver with him. What does China do out of all of that? They go to other countries around the world and they say, you should be dealing economically with us, not with those Americans, right? And they say that to other countries in Asia who have been hit hard by the tariffs as well. And they say it to the Europeans, who, remember, were talking about detaching themselves from Chinese market in recent years. Secondly, when they look at the region, what do they look at, Philip? And I'm surprised that more of the media haven't picked up on this. Let's talk about the Quad. India, Australia, Japan, with the US, right? Where is that security relationship now? When Trump is slamming tariffs on India, when he's slamming it on the Australians and the Japanese, when he's actually saying that he doesn't want to be invested in Japanese security. Chinese just have to sit back and let that play out. Where are we in terms of South Korea? When Trump has actually said also that he doesn't really feel like he's invested in South Korean security. Again, the Chinese just sit and wait and watch on this. And so I think on Taiwan, all they do is they watch the Americans effectively, even though you say that their focus is on China in terms of rhetoric, you watch the Americans retreat from Asia-Pacific security because they don't have their act together. And then China takes advantage.
Thank you for watching another episode of Frontline with me, Philip Ingram. If you want more great content, please sign up for Times Radio membership, and then you can leave comments and ask questions, which we'll endeavour to answer in other shows. And if you want to be kept up to date with day-to-day events, please tune into Times Radio. Thank you.